Today is January 16th, 1973. My name is Judson McClory. I'm a research analyst in the Office of the Historian of the Department of Labor. I'm interviewing Mr. George C. Guenther, who is the first Assistant Secretary of Labor to be in charge of the administration of the historic Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970. First thing I'd like to ask is, what did you do before coming with the department?
Well, I joined the department in September 1969 as director of the Bureau of Labor Standards. And I served as director of that bureau from September of '69 until April of 1971, when I became Assistant Secretary for Occupational Safety and Health. Prior to coming to the department in Washington, I was Deputy Secretary of Labor and Industry for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in Harrisburg for 2 years. And prior to that time, I was president of the John H. Guenther Hosiery Company in Reading, Pennsylvania, which is a family-owned company manufacturing various types of women's hosiery and other similar related garments.
How did you get interested in job safety and health in particular?
Well, I became specifically involved in the field as part of my responsibilities in state government. One of my principal responsibilities as Deputy Secretary of Labor and Industry in Pennsylvania was the job safety and health program there, workman's compensation and related activities. And quickly became apparent to me that this is a major new field, and not a new field, but a field worthy of attention. And from then on, I became kind of swept up in the whole area.
Were you surprised when you were asked to come to Washington? What were the circumstances?
No, I was not surprised when I was asked to come to Washington. A number of people came to me when the Nixon administration began and suggested to me that I should consider coming to Washington. And went further than that. They very kindly suggested my name to then Secretary Schultz and Undersecretary Hodgson, and as a result of that, I was invited down here for an interview, and from there I joined the department.
Did you know Secretary Schultz before coming with the department?
I did not, no.
What's been your greatest satisfaction in working for the Department of Labor?
Implementing the Occupational Safety and Health Act. I think although it's certainly too early to make any specific statement on the subject, that we have gotten the program off the ground. It is a major piece of labor legislation. It has a major impact on the country, on employers and employees. I think we've started the program responsibly. I think we are effectively carrying out the mandate of Congress, and that is a source. The real satisfaction is that the legislation does have genuine benefits to the workers of this country, and I think we can see those benefits already beginning to bear fruit, to come alive, and that's the real satisfaction, that we are helping people.
What's been your greatest problem?
Oh, I can't really, I've been asked this question many times. I can't say that I really have had a problem. There just wasn't enough time to do all the things that needed to be done. That's been my greatest problem.
What was the role of the department, and your role in particular, in the hammering out of the Williams-Steiger Act?
Well, the department was the leader for the administration in working with the Congress to put together the act. My role was to serve as technical advisor on a variety of subjects that had to be considered in terms of what precise positions the administration and those in Congress supporting the administration, what positions they would take. I was not an active lobbyist. I was responsible for providing the technical backup information that was used by those who did lobby actively.
The final bill was a compromise. What would you describe as strong and weak points, if any? And where could it be changed?
Oh, I think the bill as it stands is workable. It's got a variety of small, number of small problem areas, but we consider it a workable piece of legislation.
Could you go into particulars on the problem areas that you see as the problem areas of the bill?
There are a number of small sections which, in the process of compromise in the latter part of the legislation, were put together in such a way as to be not as concise and specific in stating what the intent of Congress is as they might be. But this is true with all legislation, and I don't have a particular. I'm not sure that for your purposes, getting into those kind of particulars is necessary.
Do you feel that, well, first on this, okay, what's been the biggest accomplishment of the OSHA administration?
I wouldn't be able to single out any particular thing. We promulgated a broad group of standards, job safety and health standards. We created an federal enforcement mechanism involving 10 regional offices and 51 area offices and some 20 district and other field offices reporting to the regional offices across the country. We've hired somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 people. We think we've brought good people into the program. We've trained all these people. We've established a complex of training programs and a training institute in Chicago. We've involved the states as directed by the Act. 49 of the states and territories, 49 out of 56, 50 states and 6 territories, have submitted plans to us under which they would propose to assume their own jurisdiction. We have communicated on a massive basis with people all across the country. Thousands and thousands of speeches and appearances before groups, and millions of pieces of publications of various kinds to explain the Act and what employers and employees have to do about it. All these we've started research efforts in a number of things, in a number of areas to begin to develop standards for new and unknown hazards and toxic substances. We've set up special emphasis programs for target industries and for target health hazards. We've done many things. I just can't point to, I'd say all of these together constitute the OSHA program. And I think we've got the OSHA program off the ground. And I think the responsible critics of the program, or the responsible observers, would agree that that is in fact the case. There are differences of opinion as to how somebody else might have done certain aspects of the implementation, but overall I think the honest observer would agree that we've got the program off the ground rapidly.
Okay. You mentioned critics. What pressures has OSHA been under in this administration?
Well, to oversimplify it, some employers and employer groups allege that we've gone too far, too fast in implementing the Act, that we are being harsh and arbitrary, and that in essence we're going to shut down American industry if we keep on doing what we're doing. On the other side, we have other critics, some critics from organized labor, from some of the consumer advocate groups who imply that we've done nothing, that we're going soft on the employers, that we are caving into industry pressures. We submit that neither of these positions is correct, and that in fact the fact that we are getting both of these types of criticisms is some indication that maybe we're doing something right. We're certainly somewhere in the middle. We've had criticisms that we are particularly harmful to the small businessman, which we reject, and the facts of the matter now, after review, indicate that we are correct. We are not providing a substantial new burden, an unreasonable new burden for the small businessman. We've been accused of, in particular, of harassing the small construction employer, the small home builder, the light residential construction builder. Here again, the facts of the matter would indicate that this is not a fair charge, but all of these have been groups that have accused us have been critical of one aspect or another of OSHA.
In particular on standards, the consensus standard has been criticized as being, I'm just reflecting criticisms that I hear, of course, have been criticized as being company or produced by company dominated organizations, and that they're not as strong as other standards. They're not the best standards available. How good are they?
Well, I think we've learned in the last couple of years that consensus standards are not all things to all people. They have deficiencies. We adopted consensus standards because the Act told us to. The Act very specifically says for the first group of standards, which are to be adopted as quickly as possible, the department should choose from existing national consensus standards and from existing federal standards under previous statutes, which we did. In our first package of standards, there was no new standard in it. We adopted and codified and organized existing standards into a package of standards covering as broad environmental territory, workplace environmental territory as we could, and have gone on from there. We are now coming up with new standards, subjects that were not covered, particularly in the areas of occupational health and agriculture, where there were virtually, or where the existing standards were limited. We are coming up with new standards.
Do you feel that the relatively strong role given the Department of Labor in the administration of the Act has helped or hindered enforcement of the law? If you recall, the Secretary testified, wrote a letter favoring the bill which would have divided up the authority. How do you feel that this more centralized authority has worked out?
Well, I think it's worked out all right. I think, as I mentioned before, in commenting on the bill, or on the Act itself, you can, properly administered, you can make any piece of legislation, virtually any approach to a particular subject to work. And we've made the Act as written work. We believed, during the congressional consideration of the Act, we believed that equity of administration would have been better served had there been a separate organization to create the standards outside of the Labor Department, a standards setting board, and the department itself to then enforce those standards, and then the courts or some other body to review the department's role in the enforcement process. The administration's proposed legislation followed that pattern. There were advocates of another approach who prevailed, and their approach was that the Secretary shall set the standards and he shall then enforce those standards, and that the only separate agency shall be the Review Commission, who reviews the department's activities. That's the way the Act was passed. That's the way we have implemented it, and it seems to be working all right, as far as we can tell.
Okay, getting on to the state programs. The recent court injunction barring the extension of the interim agreements is a problem. How will the department will it be able to enforce the program if appeals are not do not overturn it?
Oh, the program will go on. I feel very strongly that the American worker will be shortchanged during the brief period of time that state programs are not operative until we approve a submitted state plan. And the purpose of the temporary orders, which we proposed to issue, was to eliminate the protection gap which otherwise would have existed from the end of December until a state plan is approved. The injunction by enjoining us from issuing such temporary orders eliminates state program activity until we get to the point of approving a plan. And therefore workers in those particular states are deprived of whatever activities were ongoing by the state during this particular period of time. For certain representatives of organized labor to have sought this injunction is in my judgment, a direct disservice to the people they purport to represent. But they have seen fit to come out for law and order in this case, and if that be the case, if that is their position, we'll just see what the courts will do.
Is there a conflict in your judgment between the efforts on the one hand to establish high and fairly uniform standards among the states, and on the other hand giving them flexibility and local control of the programs? And if so, how would it be resolved?
No, I don't see any conflict there. There's nothing in our regulations with regard to the development of a state plan that would lead to a uniform set of standards in the states. The basic guideline which the states must meet is that their standards must be, in our judgment, must be provably as effective as the federal standards. So in essence, that puts a floor on their standards. They can go, there is no ceiling, they can go as far up or sideways as they wish to go, so long as they can support the claim to be at least as effective as the federal standards. And the same basic criterion holds for the enforcement programs, their training programs, and anything else that they contemplate having as part of their total state plan. 50% of which we would then, if approved, we would then support by a grant. So I don't think there's any conflict. Now, if what you are getting to is problems that could arise for multi-state corporations who do business in a variety of states and who may have to deal with 50 different sets of standards and enforcement processes and so forth, we recognize that there are potential dangers here. However, our experience has been that the state plans that we have received are all pretty close to the federal approach. There is nobody who has. It's too difficult to be all that different.
You anticipated a question I was going to ask about the state program.
Yes.
Just they were approaching pretty much the federal.
They are all pretty much in the same ballpark, so that we don't believe that multi-state companies are going to have any problems. We're not aware of any significant problems yet faced by large companies that operate in a variety of states.
And also, well, let me ask about the phrase "as effective as." Has this been defined in a very explicit way?
We've done the best we could to define it in a variety of regulations and policy statements and other ways. Many meetings with state representatives and designees. I think we've gone pretty far in defining what as effective as is, and we can provide you with a ream of written material, subjective, if you like.
Okay, well, let's look at the future of occupational safety and health. Is the Department of Labor's role going to increase or decrease now that as the states take over the programs? What will the department's role be?
Well, the department's role will shift somewhat. First of all, in the area of standard setting, the department will continue to be the prime mover in the development of standards, which the states are then obligated to come up with standards which will be as effective as. So the standard setting role will continue, and in fact become a larger part of the federal activity as we go along. The enforcement, the federal enforcement role will over time be reduced as the states enlarge their own capacity to enforce their own standards. But there will always be an enforcement role. There will always be some states that do not have approved programs, and the federal presence will be a full one there. There will be states who elect not to cover certain issues, and so there will be partial federal jurisdiction over those uncovered particular issues in those states. We will always have a presence in the maritime area, for example, where maritime law prohibits the states from assuming jurisdiction. So there will always be a federal enforcement program there. So our enforcement efforts will be reduced as the states move in to fill in that area of the program. Our training and education efforts, however, will probably increase as we go along as a significant part of program need. We haven't really begun to do the job in training and education yet. We've been busy training our own people. But now we're ready to begin the outreach process to employers and employees. In fact, we've already commenced it. So there, I would say that our training and education role will certainly increase. So I think, we will have a constant, perpetual responsibility to monitor the state programs, so that we will always have a presence in all of the states, whether or not they have an operating plan. Because even where there is a plan in effect, we will be monitoring on a very close basis to ensure that an effective program is carried out and that federal funds are being properly utilized.
What about the role of the unions? They seem now to be picking up the ball a little bit. What do you see their role in the future?
Oh, I think it should greatly enlarge. I think the safety and health of workers as a matter for the concern of a union is probably an issue than which there is nothing more important. If they're not safe and healthy, they aren't earning, they aren't paying their dues. They're worth nothing to the union. I think it is a critical issue. I think it has not received the attention it should from organized labor over the years. Hasn't received the attention it should from management, as far as that goes. Organized labor, some parts of organized labor have been very responsible in picking up and getting into this job, and staffing and addressing the management as the top levels of certain unions have made it clear that they want an aggressive job safety and health program for their union, and they've got one. And some other unions have not yet really gotten on board.
What are the unions that have really gotten on the ball?
Well, I would point to, particularly in the building trades. The building trades have, over the years, been active. The operating engineers, in particular, over the years, have been active. But other unions, the laborers, the International Laborers Union, well, virtually most of the building trades, I would say. The electrical workers have active programs. The UAW has an active program. The steel workers have an active program. The rubber workers have an active program. A number of other of the so-called CIO unions, the industrial unions, have good programs, although not as many as I'd like to see. The Teamsters have a way to go. They're getting started, but they have a way to go. The AFL-CIO itself, in its top management, has a way to go in terms of getting started. They have certain critics in their Washington headquarters, but they don't have an organization of any sort to speak of to deal with the job safety and health challenge the way it should be dealt with.
You mentioned the UAW, Mr. Franklin Wallach, who's looked at the American worker, a perhaps biased viewpoint, to say the least. The government's role. What? How do you react to the book?
Well, I have read. I'm not sure. You say the American Worker.
American Worker and Endangered Species.
I've read excerpts from that book. I have not read the whole book, but unfortunately, Mr. Wallach chooses in his writing, and he, as the editor of the UAW's Washington newsletter, does a lot of writing. Chooses a most aggressive and hypercritical style of writing that falls in the Jack Anderson category of writing. I think Mr. Wallach is biased and unfair in many of the things that he writes. And whatever his motivations are, I'm sure I don't know, but I'm certain some of them are political. So I regret that he has that a man with his access to people, to readership, chooses the style he chooses, because I think he has a contribution to make. But I think he's very unfair in many of the things he says, and obviously he's grinding axes other than worker protection in many cases. So I'm unhappy. I regret that he uses that this is his approach, but it is, so we accept it and go on. I would say that other representatives of the UAW who do not have the same access to the printed word and to a readership are much more responsible, dedicated, and competent in this field than Mr. Wallach. But they don't get to talk very much.
Final question on the Occupational Safety and Health Administration itself. Has been going on a debate on how rapidly it should grow. Should they go for very rapid growth now while it still has high visibility, or should it be a moderate growth, kind of wait and see how the program works out? What do you see the growth of the OSHA administration?
I don't see it. I don't see it growing at all. I see it staying at about the size it is presently, and shifting to meet the new program needs, as we've been talking about. Then the shifting emphasis within the program, I would say we will be staying about where we are in terms of size at the federal level. Now, at the state level, I see growth over time in state programs in terms of people. I see at the federal level, I believe there will be a need for additional funding for the states as the states add to their programs. We, of course, if we keep our commitment to the states to fund half their 50% of program cost, as the state programs grow, we'll have to provide additional funding. So there will be additional demands for funds at the federal level, but I don't foresee too much of a growth in terms of personnel at the federal level. These are all speculations of my own. Obviously, administration decisions with regard to fiscal policy and budgets and so forth, and other policy in the future will be the determining factor.
Is this limited growth a matter of choice or more circumstances?
I'd say my comments are as realistic an appraisal of what I see in the future as I can give you. I think that's probably what's going to happen. And I think the program can accomplish what it has been designed to accomplish under those circumstances.
I'd like to ask some more questions about the state plans. Do you feel that the states have been a little slow, it would appear to me, in responding and submitting plans? Do you feel that the 50% funding of the program is perhaps not enough of a stimulation as a higher percentage?
No, that wasn't for whatever delays existed in the submission of state plans. It was not caused by the level of federal grants. It was caused, my judgment, by the very simple fact that this is a bigger job than anybody really appreciated when they sat down to do it. This is a complicated job, and it is not only complicated in and of itself, but it providing a new state approach to job safety and health quickly becomes a political issue within the state, so that many additional complications arose in political arenas in states across the country. So there just was not a very simple process, and I think recognizing those factors, that the states did a magnificent job in producing the plans. Virtually all of them have produced a plan, and I think that's pretty good. I think that's good production in a very limited period of time.
So you feel that the 2-year limitation imposed in the Act was perhaps an unrealistic estimate?
Hindsight, if that time period could have been 3 years, maybe it would have been the same kind of crunch at the end of the 3 years as there is at the end of 2. I don't know. I think the 2 years was a pretty good guess on the part of Congress as to how long it ought to take to get this thing going. And in fact, the 2 years misses the target by a couple of months. And I don't think that's bad. I think that's pretty good guesstimating. And had we had 3 years, we probably would have missed it by a couple of months anyway. That's the way these kinds of things work.
What other responsibilities do you have besides the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or is that the entirety of your responsibilities?
Well, I'm responsible for the operation of all job safety and health statutory responsibilities of the Secretary, which goes beyond the William Steiger Act, goes to the Walsh-Healy Act, goes to the Longshoremen and Harbor Workers Act, it goes to the Construction Safety Act, it goes to well, there are a number of other minor statutes in the area that are my responsibility. Those are all there. That all comes into this office.
These will be superseded by the...
Eventually. They continue to be in effect now, but one of the responsibilities that OSHA has under the Act is within 3 years to make recommendations to Congress as to what to do about these other continuing pieces of legislation, how to tie it all together, which we are working